Points for family travel. So let's talk about all of the various things you can do to save money when you're traveling with a family, right?
Let's start with flights. One of the things you've written a bit about in the past is lap infant policies by airline, right? What do you
Sure.
recommend there?
Well, domestically, lap infants are free, and it doesn't matter what program you've booked an award through. If you've booked an award flight, so even if you booked through a foreign carrier and they try to tell you that you have to pay for a lap infant, just ignore whatever they're saying and just go to the airport a little early. Be prepared to take a little time because, for instance, if you book a United flight through Turkish, it might take them a little while to figure out how to add the lap infant, but I've done it plenty of times, and it can be done. It just might take a little extra time with the agent. But if you're booking a paid flight or an award flight, simple, like an American flight with American miles, or United flight with United miles, or a cash ticket, again, domestically within the United States, there's no fee for a lap infant.
Does that include Spirit? I mean, Spirit, charges
Yep.
extra for carry-on bags, so they don't charge extra for carry-on kids.
They don't charge extra for carry-on kids. No, they don't. And most of the domestic airlines, and maybe there's a law or rule about this, but my recollection anyway is that a car seat will fly for free, stroller will fly for free, so you can check those things, and they don't count against checked baggage allowance. And Spirit will check them for free. So even the low-cost carriers, you can check those things for free.
So idea for any entrepreneurs out there, a luggage that's shaped like a car seat would be really handy.
Well, I mean, and that's a good tip for somebody who's a new parent out there. If you're not familiar, if you're going to bring a car seat with you, you want to get a car seat bag for it, both A, because they're going to handle it rough and you don't want the thing thrown all over the place and stuff getting ripped, but B, because you can stuff a lot of stuff inside that car seat bag. So, diapers and all sorts of stuff in there. There's plenty of room that you can use that as an extra checked bag and, save some money on an airline like Spirit. I've done it, and, definitely something I would recommend. If you're breastfeeding, breast pump is considered a medical device. So that does not count against your carry-on allowance, again, even on Spirit. So that's a good tip to know anyway, if you're traveling. And you can bring breast milk through security. So that's something I bring up again, because if you're a new parent, that's a question we have. We're like, I don't know how this stuff works. Now, lap infant friendly airlines. So again, domestically, no fee. Internationally, usually most airlines will charge you 10% of the revenue fare. And so that's 10% of a paid ticket fare. And how they calculate that is sometimes really weird. So sometimes it'll be a lot more than you expect. And international, like business and first class, paid tickets, especially one-way tickets, can be really expensive. So, you can be paying 10% of a five or six or eight or 10 or $20,000 fare pretty easily with some of the things that we typically take for granted booking with miles. And, personally, I don't want to pay $2,000 for the honor of having an infant sit on my lap for a few hours. So if you don't want to do that, you want to book through the right airlines. So what are the right airlines? Air Canada is the best. So if you're going to book a lap infant ticket, look at using the Aeroplan award chart, because a lap infant will only cost you 2,500 miles. And that's true in business or in first class or in economy. It doesn't matter. It's 2,500 miles, or I think it's 25 Canadian dollars, which depending on the exchange rate might even be, just worth paying that, or probably is worth paying that even over the miles. But either way, very inexpensive. That's the best deal in terms of a lap infant fee. Second best deal after that is typically Virgin Atlantic. They have different charts for different partners, but basically the usual with most partners, it's 2,500 miles for a lap infant in economy, 5,000 in business, 7,000 in first. So you'll pay that, I think, each way. But still, again, that's much better than paying 10% of the adult revenue fare. Second cheapest deal for a lap infant ticket. So that's your second best bet. Third best bet would be there are a few programs that charge 10% of the adult mileage fare, which is going to be more probably than those other two that I've mentioned so far. But again, a lot better than paying 10% of the revenue fare. British Airways Avios is one of those that charges 10% of the adult mileage fare. I believe Emirates Skywards also is one that charges 10% of the adult mileage fare. And ANA used to charge 10% of the revenue fare. And I think maybe they give you the option of paying that still if you want to pay 10% of the revenue fare, but you're much better off paying 10% of the adult mileage ticket with ANA. So those are the ones that pop into my mind. Also, Asiana has the same 10% of the adult fare, but who has Asiana miles? Not very many of you listening, probably. So if you do, great. But if not, that's probably not going to be super relevant for you. So
right.
those are the best deals.
People are always writing in, we want to go to Florida or Hawaii, but we can only travel during our kids' school break. And very well that the chance of finding award availability for 4 to those popular destinations during those specific times is even lower chance than me buying that Frontier Go Wild pass. So, so what are some ways of getting around those issues?
Well, the first thing you got to get around is the way you framed that was you want to go to Hawaii or Florida, and that's not what you want. What you want is you want to go where there are 4 seats available to go. And so that's the first step, is being flexible. And there's a lot of things you can't be flexible about. You can't change the school schedule. You can't change their activities. So don't focus on the things that you can't change. And you can't change the fact that there's not going to be any award availability to fly to Hawaii during Thanksgiving break or whatever the case might be. Like, those are things you can't change. There's no magical solution to make extra seats open up and airlines feel like they're not going to sell them so they can give them to you on miles. Just not going to happen. So if that's really what you want, then a cashback strategy is probably something that's going to make more sense, or points that can be used for a cash ticket. Instead, what I recommend is that you figure out, okay, well, where is there availability during the times when I'm free? And then plan your trip around that. So rather than picking one specific destination, say, you know what, I'd like to go to Europe during summer break. Where can we get to in Europe during summer break? And take a look and see, okay, well, I wrote a post this week where I showed there were multiple days with 9 seats available in business class from New York to Geneva, Switzerland. So ask yourself, well, would I like to go to Geneva? Maybe there's something in Switzerland that's worth seeing that you'd enjoy with your family. It may not have been the trip you initially had in mind, but you might find some fun and interesting things and go back to a different place the next time, because goodness knows there'll be something else with availability the next time. Or even better yet, probably Swiss has availability to connect onward elsewhere within Europe. So you may be able to get to other places within Europe, or use other miles to get to other places in Europe from Geneva. So it doesn't have to be your endpoint. Flights within Europe are pretty cheap. Trains can be cheap when you book them far enough in advance. So there's enough ways to get other places that if Geneva isn't the endpoint you want, that's fine. I mean, for under $100, you could probably fly to most of Europe per passenger. So that to me is more the way to plan trips to major continents like that. Look at the gateways that you can get to. And it's worth checking different gateways on both ends of the trip, because you can probably get to the major US gateways for a reasonable price, or at least to more than one US gateway for a reasonable price from wherever you are. And even if you're in a small city, there's probably more than one big city that you can get to for a reasonable-ish price. And just look at the positioning as part of the cost of doing business. That's just the way it goes when you're beholden to the school schedule. It is going to cost you a little bit more, just like traveling with 4 is going to cost you more than traveling with 2. So I think that's just part of it. And that's where I start. Be flexible. Be flexible about where you're going to go.
A related idea is a flexible stopover. The idea being, yeah, you might want to go to Australia over, winter break, but getting a good flight from the US to Australia during winter break under normal circumstances is impossible. But I wrote a post a few years ago where I sort of challenged myself, could I get a family of 4 there during the break? And the way to do it at that time was, well, look, award flights to Northern Asia were actually wide open to some destinations. So could easily get 4 people to Japan or I can't actually remember where I had in the post, but it doesn't really matter. And then from there, like a few days later, fly to Australia, and that all worked by having that kind of stopover. So, even domestically, you can think about things like that. Let's say you definitely want to go to Hawaii. You're locked in on that. Maybe you're starting from the East Coast. Maybe you could find a cheap flight to somewhere on the West Coast, like Seattle area or something. And then I bet you could find cheap flights from Seattle to Hawaii, especially if it's not right as the school break starts. You know what I mean? So
Right.
spend a couple days seeing Seattle and then fly on to Hawaii.
Yeah, that's a really good tip, and the Hawaii tip, is one that certainly could work out for you. The Asia tip for a way to get to Australia, for instance, I think is an important tip to highlight though, because we often, I think Americans often that are into miles and points think of award availability as being difficult, but that's because we're often looking to and from the United States. When you're looking at connecting other regions around the world between point A and B that are where the United States is neither A or B, it's typically a lot easier to find availability than it is
Right.
starting or ending in the US. So if you can get to Asia, then you can probably connect the dots to get to Australia or New Zealand or wherever else it is you'd like to go. And same token, if you get to Europe, you can probably get to wherever it is you need to go from Europe, whether that's within Europe or the Middle East or India or something else. A lot easier to get awards between other regions. So
Right.
the stopover trick is a good one. And there are programs that are good for a stopover, right? Like Alaska allows a stopover on a one-way for free. So you can still take advantage of some of their great sweet spots, 50,000 miles to Asia, and you can do a stopover in Hong Kong if and when Hong Kong is easily open for tourists. I know that they've been easing things up, but maybe they're not there yet. I don't know. But that's one to keep in mind. And of course, obviously, Air Canada Aeroplan allows a stopover for 5,000 miles on a one-way. So you can book it as part of your trip with one of those.
Right. And if you can't, you can just, look for the best award availability on one program to Asia, and it might be a totally different program to get to Australia. Yes, that'll cost you a bit more than a single trip to Australia would if it was available, but we're talking about going during prime time. You're going to have to pay a bit more.
Yeah, it's going to cost you a bit more during prime time. Yeah, and I mean, and that's a really good example because American Airlines charges 40,000 miles one way between the South Pacific and North Asia in business class. So you could fly Japan Airlines between, again, like Japan, you can start in Japan and fly Japan Airlines business class. You can fly Cathay Pacific business class. You can fly Qantas business class, all for 40,000 miles each way. Fiji Airways I probably serves Tokyo. So you got a whole bunch of different options to put that trip together with a different set of miles. So, if you get a good deal on your flights to and from Japan, and then you use that to get to and from Australia or New Zealand, your net cost is not going to be all that much higher than an award directly to Australia, but your net chances of making that trip happen are infinitely higher than if you're only looking at nonstops from the United States.
Right.
Companion tickets. There's a lot of different ways to get companion tickets. Do you want to talk about the Delta companion certificate at all? I know that's one of the many types of certificates.
Sure. So if you're looking at paid flights and a way to make them much less expensive for family travel, one approach is to get certain credit cards that include companion tickets. And so if you and your significant other each get one of those cards, so you each have a companion ticket, then 4 people can fly for roughly half price. I mean, some of these, like the Alaska Airlines one, requires a $99 copay plus taxes and fees. The Delta ones, if you have a Delta Platinum or Delta Reserve card, then upon the card anniversary, you'll get a certificate that you can use for regional round trip travel. And same thing, you have to pay the taxes, but there's not that $99 thing. But it's a great way to, if you're going to be traveling during school break and prices are outrageous, to book what you need. I do need to say, like, some of these, especially the Delta ones, are only valid on the cheaper fare classes. So if you don't snag that really early, like way before your trip, the cheaper fare classes are going to be all gobbled up by the time you're ready to book. So with that one, do it as close to 11 months ahead as you can. Alaska cards, I don't think, have that restriction.
No, yeah, I've booked it last minute before, so I don't think that there's any restriction in terms of the fare class. It has to be economy on the Alaska one, although it can be economy that's upgradable if you're an elite member with Alaska and you've got the MVP, upgrades, whatever they call them there. Then you can upgrade it to first, and I have done that before. But yeah, I mean, those can be really good deals, and keep these in mind too. Something I should have mentioned when I mentioned flexible destinations before, and I didn't. but I think it fits in here with the companion tickets, is that these companion tickets can be useful for positioning flights for those international things. If you're going to live in New York, but you got to position to Chicago because that's where award availability is, this time around, then these companion tickets can obviously help make that less expensive. And the tip that I wanted to put in earlier that I'm going to slide in here instead is that I wrote in the post I wrote this week about starting from different gateways. With my wife and I, we've talked now about the possibility of me and one son, on one flight, and her and another son on a different flight, if that needs to happen. And sometimes you might need to position at different places. Or we booked a trip to Fiji for next year, where the four of us are flying out of either Los Angeles or San Francisco. I can't honestly remember which one we're out of, but we're out of one or the other. And then we've got other family members flying out of the other city on the same day, because Fiji Airways serves both San Francisco and Los Angeles. So we were able to pick up 4 award seats on both, on the flights from both cities on the same day, and they arrive within 35 minutes of each other. So we're all going to get to Fiji at about the same time. We have to position to California anyway, so it didn't really make a difference if we had some family members positioned to San Francisco and the rest of us to Los Angeles. And using companion certificates can help reduce the cost. Somebody gets an Alaska card, and there you go, you get half off on the positioning flight for that particular trip. Southwest, of course, is
okay. So sorry. So the best way of taking advantage of splitting it up is to not have to travel with your kids. You let the little kids go on one flight, and you and your significant other go on the other, and everyone's happy, except for the people on that other flight.
Except for the people on that other flight. Yeah, exactly. Most of the ones we just talked about are like a one-time deal, and there are other ones you can spend towards. There's something with Virgin Atlantic, 25,000 spent. I think there's something with the British Airways Avios cards where some of the cards you spend 30K and you get a travel together ticket. Aeroplan, if you want to spend $1 million, you can get somebody to fly with you for free. I think each time you fly
for a whole year. Yeah,
for a whole year.
For all award tickets. So just if you and your spouse each spend $1 million on an Aeroplan card, then you're set for you and your 2 kids.
Alternatively, if you get 2 Southwest credit cards, you can get a companion pass with Southwest and have your at least one person fly with you for free. We could probably both do that for a better deal anyway with Southwest Airlines. So I mentioned Southwest, of course, because the Southwest Companion Pass is, I think, probably the best deal in domestic travel, in the sense that once you've earned 125,000 as of right now, next year it's changing to 135,000. Once you earn enough points within a single calendar year, you get a companion pass where the second person flies with you for free, whether you booked your ticket with cash or with points, or somebody else booked your ticket. Second person flies for free. They just pay the taxes, which domestically are $5.60. So we were longtime companion pass holders in my household, and if you have a family of 4, and you can get 2 of these, because both player 1 and player 2 could get a business card and a consumer card, you could end up paying for 2 flights every time and having all 4 of you fly. So that can be a really good deal, especially for people who primarily want to travel domestically and don't mind Southwest boarding process where you don't have an assigned seat, which I certainly don't. And if you're flying with a family, all the better, because you don't even have to worry about early bird check-in or having to check in 24 hours in advance, because people with children under 6 years old board after the A group. So you board before the B group does. So I haven't bothered to check in early for a Southwest flight in forever. That just burned me recently when I went to Miami, because I forgot to check in, ended up with a C boarding position because I'm so used to flying alone. Exactly. So I'm so used to flying with my family. I'm like, oh, I don't have to bother checking in for my Southwest flight because I'm going to board after the A group anyway. Of course, like I said, that burned me when I was flying alone. But if you're flying with a family, that's a great advantage. So you don't have to worry about your boarding position with Southwest. So lots of good stuff there. I think that particular one can be a really good one, but all of those various companion tickets can help you save money if you're traveling with a family.